Hey, how's it going? This is Joe and Tell. Today we're going to find out how the speaker positioning affects the sound. So I'm going to be checking the toe in, toe out, the height of the speaker, and the rake angle. Let's see what happens. But first, a quick message from our show sponsor.
Klipsch was founded in 1946, going back to their Klipsch horns, horn walls, and La Scalas, to something more modern, like wireless powered speakers, soundbars, and true wireless earbuds. And with all that history, they still are unafraid to innovate. At this year's CES, they showed off the Fives, powered speakers with HDMI ARC. So for people looking for a pair of bookshelf speakers to pair with their TV, this is the perfect option. They also have a wide selection, from their RF73 floor standing speakers to the RP600M bookshelf speakers that I have here. They also have affordable entry-level speakers like the R41Ms. Visit Klipsch.com to see their wide selection of products. Also make sure to follow them on their social media accounts at Klipsch Audio on Instagram and Twitter, or at Klipsch, links in the description.
Alright, so the first thing I want to do in this test is I want to see what happens when you move off axis on these speakers. Now it's different for every speaker, so you kind of have to take this with a grain of salt because of that. Now what we want to do is, I have this mic about the same height as my ears, and so that's what we're going to be using for this measurement. And from a previous video, we found that 3/4 of the way into the room was kind of like the optimal position that gave us the flattest response. But first, what we need to do is see what's happening when we go off axis on these speakers, horizontally and vertically. So you're going to be able to see the changes on the graph, but you're also going to be able to hear the changes because I'm playing pink noise, and pink noise is all of the frequencies at the same power level, I believe. Anyway, the point being, you should be able to hear a difference in the sound. So let's go. And my computer just didn't record that part. So here we are, we're doing it again. All right, so I played that in fast motion so you can kind of see better how the changes are affecting the sound. But that was horizontal. Now let's see what happens vertical, right? So on the horizontal one, I noticed that the top end response, so the higher frequencies, started to dip down when I was going off axis. So let's see what happens vertical. All right, so what I noticed there was, did you notice that there's a dip around 1.5 kilohertz? And that would change depending on where I was on the vertical plane. And it seemed to be the best when it was right in between the center of the woofer and the center of the tweeter. Like right in between those sounded the best. So I would imagine that if you were sitting a little bit higher, like right now I have these low speaker stands, it wasn't optimal. Right? So I would want some higher stands, I believe. We'll have to see if that's the truth. So let me go ahead and save this just for a reference here. So optimal vertical response. Okay, cool. Now that we know that, let me go ahead and put this mic back here in my listening position. Okay, so this is an omnidirectional mic. It doesn't really matter which way you point it, but you kind of get the idea here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the speaker forward and backwards, and let's see how much that changes the SPL, or the loudness. Also, let's see if it changes the frequency response. All right, so I don't know if you were able to see that, but you should have seen that it got louder as it got closer. You'd expect that, right? But that's something to keep in mind. If you have one speaker that's playing louder than the other, make sure that it's not just closer to you, right? Also, if it's closer to a wall, it'll have more bass, so it'll also sound louder. So play around bringing speakers forward and backwards to kind of get them at least balanced with regards to loudness. If you can't, then there's usually a balance knob that you can use. So let's go ahead and try different off-axis, so horizontal off-axis response. So I'm going to toe it in, toe it out. See if you can hear a difference, and see if you can tell the difference here on the graph, and try to find the place where it sounds best, where it's the most flat here on the graph. All right, so that's interesting. Something that I would expect, but on axis, when I have this pointed directly at that microphone, so the horizontal off axis, right, seems to give me the best top end response, so the flattest response. And that kind of correlates with some people when they say, like, when you're using horn loaded or, you know, something with a large waveguide, to do that extreme toe in. So you know who you are, right? Ron. You know, where it kind of crosses over, and it kind of makes sense. It looks like it's crossing over, but it's actually pointed directly at the microphone. So the center here is pointed there, but it kind of looks like, if I were to sit here, it kind of looks like this thing is facing over there, right? But it's not. So this is pointed directly at the microphone, and that seems to give me the best top end response. So very interesting. Let's try to see what happens if I tilt the speakers versus if I were to use higher stands. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so based on what I'm seeing here on the graphs, it didn't look like it was making much of a difference. I was expecting it to, I was hoping that it would, but it didn't look like it helped very much. Let's go ahead and just see what happens if we lift this up. So I have other speaker stands over there, but I'm just gonna simulate that effect just by lifting up the speaker, right? So let's see. I'm gonna lift it to a point where this point is above that microphone. I think that this speaker doesn't like it if it's below. If your listening position is above the speaker, it doesn't like that. That's my guess. So these are those higher stands that I was talking about. This might be a little bit too high. I have some that are shorter, but let's just see what happens if I use these. All right, so what I'm looking for is, I still want this to be pointed at that because we found that that's where it sounds the best. But this here now, that center line is about even with the microphone. So let's see what happens when I just use this taller stand. Cool, as you can see here, so taller stand, tall stand. This one was a lower stand, right? So let me go ahead and get rid of this one. And as you can see, right, on axis, right, but with a lower stand, we had this dip, and it was a little bit lower than if I used the higher stand, right? So you can see it's smoothed out right there. So definitely with these particular speakers, you're gonna wanna be slightly below that tweeter and on axis if you want that top end extension. There it is. I think we've learned something today, and that is that you really wanna play around with the speaker angle, right? So this is different for every speaker. So this is for these RP600Ms. You're gonna wanna kind of do the same thing. Try to figure out, you know, move it. Maybe if you can have somebody else help you out, they can move it and see what sounds best to you. You know, make sure that you try different heights, see what works best for you, right? Move it forward and backwards. You know, width, that's a whole different video, trying to figure out stereo separation and imaging and avoiding the crosstalk that you get. So that's for a different video. That's going to be a little tougher to do. But hopefully you learned something. Let me know in the comments what you think.